Everybody, it is Romania Black, and I don't like that we only have 4 episodes left of Orb on the Movements of the Earth. This is our last month of Orb, and I'm not happy about it. So, but what can we do? The world keeps rotating, the world keeps spinning, and we just have to adapt to it. So, and keep on trucking. So I have some comments I want to dive into before we start this episode. There's one from episode 18 that I wanted to dive in because it touched on some pretty good points. And then there are some from episodes 20 and 21 I want to get into as well. So this will be a little bit long of an intro, but I promise we're touching on some good things that need to be talked about before we dive into episode 22 and see this disaster of a plan that is about to go down. I'm not looking forward to it. So You'll Sell Crescent for episode 18 actually had 2 comments that I've kind of combined into one. The first comment talked about a part here that I hadn't really tied in yet. They were saying the part in the OP where a cherry is popped, followed by Schmidt and Lewandowski, whose name I get constantly wrong, and then Aksha and Bodini always make me giggle. I had never thought of Schmidt and Lewandowski as a ship, but it's valid. I respect the ship. I'm like, I can see it, especially when like they're staring at each other at the end of episode 21 and Lewandowski's like, are we doing it? And Schmidt's like, we're doing it. I'm like, okay, I respect this ship. I see the vision. I see it. That's pretty cool. They said what I found as a canon feat, so to say, is that in the manga at the beginning of chapter 53, there is a start of 4 colored pages that are somewhat of a promo featuring Raffle, Aksha, Bodini, and Draka's hand. Raffle's hand holds the astrolabe, which is in the corner there with the Chi logo. Draka's hand holds the coin in the corner, and there's the Chi logo. And now Aksha's hands hold a sword and Bodini's a quill. But what's particular in their case is that they each have 1/2 of the Chi symbol stretching on a whole page. So if you put both pages side by side, they make the complete picture of a Chi. So I think Uoto Sensei himself might be hinting at something. No, at this point, Aksha and Bodini are canon. Look, they're canon. Society may not have been ready for them at the time to come out as canon, but they are a canon couple. I will accept y'all can just think they're friends. That's fine. But if you, they're pretty much a ship. And then they also said what's hard to get behind. So they were talking about Draka in episode 18, Draka and Schmidt and their arguments with one another. They said what can be hard to get behind is Draka's point of view. I understand why people become less religious with time because of the many discoveries and the facilitation of information. So the much broader perspectives we have nowadays makes it easier for us to question the church's teachings or the existence of religion itself. However, take all of that scientific progress away, and what exactly would make a medieval person shed every bit of faith and become a complete atheist? We don't see the uncle explaining his statement, and we didn't see Draka questioning it either, which makes me skeptical on how such a belief survived in a society where church and religion are intrinsic parts of everyday life. I think one thing that kind of helps is, one, they're nomads, and it's kind of established that the church took them in. So they weren't necessarily like, I mean, Draka may have been born with her parents having that faith, but it's not like it's an instilled practice that's been there for centuries. It was kind of forced upon them through colonization, and they just kind of were like, okay, cool, and accepted it. So I think that's one part of it. But also, in any point in society, you can go back to the lectures with Aristotle and Socrates. You can go back to them questioning religion. They questioned it quite frequently, actually, and all of that. So you could go back to those discussions. They've been here for thousands of years. So even when the church was an intrinsic part of life, people were questioning it thousands and thousands of years ago. It's just whether those voices had power or not, and whether those voices actually had enough power to overthrow the other. I mean, Christianity in itself, many Christians will point out, they're like, well, we were persecuted. So, I mean, every fact of religion has been questioned, and every facet of religion has been questioned, tried to be overthrown others. Like, it's been a cycle for thousands of years. And I think that it's actually, I think from Draka's point of view, the fact that her father died and no one can give her a reasonable explanation and she's smart kind of lends itself to maybe believing that. But I mean, there's lots of different ways. I didn't think it was much of a stretch, but I mean, look at people now that have been in like cults, or people that have been grown up around religion their entire lives. Even if they didn't have access to the science, they may still question it. I mean, experiences do that to people. I don't know. That's just my view on it. But anyway, Jav Gamer for episode 20 says, this might have been my own messed up interpretation. There are no messed up interpretations here. But I think the subtext was that Jolenta was implying when she had her last talk with Draka that if she met her dad again and he tried to stop her, she would have killed him. She says that if she saw him again, it would be the worst day of her life, but she wouldn't run away from it and would stand by her convictions. And right before she mentions that, she talks about how he was an inquisitor. Yeah, I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. I think that's why even if she did notice him at the end, she's like, I don't want to fight him, so bye. She doesn't want to mess with her convictions. And that would be the worst day of her life if she had to fight and kill her father with her own bare hands. So she chose the route that let her stay by her convictions and also avoid that scenario. It just happened to claim her life in the process. E.B. Wolmos says, I think Jolenta knew at the end. She was allowed to find that peace, and Nowak was intentionally denied it, which is poetic. Oh, I love that. I love it so much. I love that comment. I'm like, yes, she got to have the last word. She got to choose the way she went out. She got to choose to hold her convictions and not fight her father. And Nowak has to just deal with the aftermath of it, which I'm still wanting to see, but we'll see how that goes. So the movement has a pretty long comment here, but I want to read all of it. They wanted to expand from episode 20 on agnosticism. When I gave that definition, it was pretty bare bones. No knowledge of God, I take to mean what we kind of use it currently. If one is agnostic, that means that they don't have evidence that there is a God. But there could be a God, they just don't know. Therefore, it's more like, I don't know if there is a God. I haven't looked through the multiverse to find the word where there is a God or a world, but I cannot say either way that there is one definitively. So they don't have knowledge of a God, not that they haven't heard of God. The way I think of God is something that exists outside of nature, time, and space, and that is something that we cannot know. I hope that makes sense. Yes, that does clarify it quite a bit, so I'm glad that you wanted to extrapolate on that a little bit. What I find fascinating is that the Gnostics were the heretics. To know there is a God was a no-no in the early church. If you had a direct line to God, you took the power out of the hands of the church to inform and interpret the word of God for the people. I hope I got that right. Well, I mean, Catholicism, in a sense. I know there is more to it, different philosophies and writings as well. My mom was always facilitated with the early church and how it tried to shape itself with philosophical writing that were very different from what we have now. From what I gather, the Gnostics were into mysticism as well. I really need to do more research onto them. I just find it very interesting because anytime you see Christmas and things like that and Easter, which, it combines somewhat pagan traditions with Christianity and how we morph it. If you really get into the research of the holidays and the traditions and stuff, it's interesting how much things have kind of merged together and religion has picked and chosen from other religions to benefit itself. And it's fascinating. It's fascinating. But crawling towards good. Yes. What a great line. We always have to remember that the arc of justice takes a long time to assert itself. Are there aspects of humanity that are absolutely bestial and evil? We do have a choice, and our empathy that is also hardwired into us can win out in time. I always have to remember that even though there are things that are absolutely terrible today, hundreds of years ago, it was worse. The flame of knowledge and enlightenment still burns in us. Yeah, I have to remind myself that as well, Moomin, because there are times where I feel really bad and then I think about things happening in a different time period or a different point of this planet. And I'm like, oh, it's not that bad. Right. Geen on the Discord for episode 21, they're Polish. So they were like, Jolenta's last name should be Nowak on the book. But Waka, I can't say it right, literally means publisher in Polish. So basically the book says Jolenta publisher, and they had a whole conversation in the Discord about how that word is not what they should have used, or they should have switched it to say publisher Jolenta, but it was backwards. And Jav Gamer and Geen and I kind of came to the conclusion that sometimes animes don't translate right. That's okay. But I really like knowing, because that last name, I was like, is it her last name? But no, it just means publisher. Interesting. And then finally, I know that it's almost been 10 minutes, but I have a confession, y'all. I goofed. And thank you, Lucy Cry, for checking with the moderators and letting me know before I watched this episode. The kid in the flashback is not Schmidt. It's free. We find out in the episode, because the speech Free gives Schmidt before dying, "I'm going to give you time to do whatever," is the same one that the uncle in the flashback gives to the father of the child. Though for me personally, I think I managed to realize it only because I binge watched Orb in 2 days, so those scenes were just hours apart for me. Well, thank you, Lucy Cry, for clarifying that. I told them I remembered in the last episode, and during the reaction I was like, wow, the uncle of Schmidt looks a lot like Free. Well, the reason he looks a lot like Free is because it's Free's uncle. I was like, oh, that makes a lot of sense. That's also very fascinating to me, and I want to talk about it real quick before we dive in, because last episode during the discussion, I spent this whole time talking about how, because of what happened, assuming it was Schmidt as the child, because of what happened, I assumed it was Schmidt. And so the heretics and the parents getting into the argument about religion and religion causing the death of the parents, to me, if it had been Schmidt in those shoes, it would have made me think, oh, well, that's why Schmidt steered away from religion the way that he did and wanted to go to something away from humans. But the fact that it's Free, it makes sense, because it just instills that Free had this prejudice against heretics from the start because of them literally destroying his family. Unlike what I thought Schmidt did with letting go of religion in the sense of the orthodoxy, Free just held on to it even harder. And those are two sides of the same coin with religion. You can either let it go and be your own thing, or you can buckle down real hard with it. And Free chose to do the latter. So that is crazy. So it's good to have that to get that confirmed. So hopefully I don't get a ton of comments on the Discord or on Patreon or YouTube about it, because I put a comment on YouTube being like, hey, I was corrected on this. So thank you. Thank you for that correction. I really appreciate that. But yeah, I'm so excited to see what this episode gives us. And I'm also absolutely terrified. So I guess we just need to find out, right? I can't believe we have so few episodes left. Anyway, we're going to start episode 22 of Orb on the Movements of the Earth. Oh my God. And we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1. And let's go. Oh my God. Man, holy shit. I wasn't expecting the biggest confrontation of this arc so far to not be a battle with swords, but a battle with words. Anthony, what a bitch. What an absolute bitch. Oh my God. He's so awful. The worst part is he's so awful, but you know exactly what he's doing, and you get what he's saying, and it's just this opportunistic psychopath, and you're like, oh my God. So let's talk about it. We talk about it as my dog is like, throw me toys. So yeah, this episode was wild. I was going to do a shot by shot and not bring out Whiteboard Coon, but then I was like, no, I want to have Whiteboard Coon here to talk through some things. And also the show is too dark. The screenshots aren't going to matter. So man, I hate that Schmidt is dead. There went that whole idea of them running off together and being together. That didn't hold any water at all. That was that ship sank faster than Titanic, y'all. So did Lewandowski's. That ship is just blah. I mean, damn it. So yeah. So whenever we go here, so in the armory, you can't see it because it's too dark, but you can see the shields they're going to use for the Tetsuda formation to like slowly inch forward. I always think of Lord of the Rings with that formation. I think of Lord of the Rings because in that series, the orcs do a very similar tactic to advance in that movie during a battle. So that's what I was thinking the entire time. But you can see the shields lined up there at the very start of this. So, but yeah, Schmidt chooses his weapon, which is a sword. I want to talk a little bit about some of the symbolism of this. I'm going to put this up here. The idea of Schmidt dying by the sword, which seems appropriate. So he died by the sword he died by the sword with his convictions. Although there is a little bit more with Schmidt that we're going to talk about here in a hot second. But damn, I did like Draka's little speech here where she's like, I don't know any of you all, but you all are fighting for me and risking your life for me. Although in hindsight, they did have a pretty sweet setup with the shields. Then they had to fight in close combat against the other guys. So we don't know if any of those guys are going to make it or not. It'd be cool to see if, I hope we find out to see if they will, but hell, we may not find out anything. I don't know. We also didn't get any ending with the whole Nowak confrontation. I guess that's going to have to wait till next week. Oh my God, I hate that. I hate that I have to wait a week to find out. But, so I do like Draka's speech with the men and talking about how you all don't know me. I don't know you. We're all strangers here, but we all had a person that we sort of centered around. It's kind of funny you have the idea of centering around somebody, and that was Yolenta. Yolenta was at the center of it all. She's kind of at the center of this whole thing, if you think about it. She is really at the center of all of it. She's connected to Antony. She's connected to Nowak, obviously. She's connected to Draka and everybody else. This is kind of because of her. And she is there because of Bodini and the others. So it's all, I like the idea of Orb, on the movements of the Earth being about this, like, here's the Earth and here's like the solar system and everything. I do like the idea that she's kind of, at the center of all of this, but I'm going to switch my markers up here. But yeah, it was a great start. And I like that Draka knows that the printing press promise was really just to get her to cooperate, but she was influenced by Yolenta. And while it didn't mean much, she said her voice was encouraging my own way of life. She's like, you all have been encouraged by her like I have. So that's what's led us to where we are now. So, all right. So episode 22, neither of you will be known to history. Oh my God. I thought at the start of this episode, the neither of you was referring to Schmidt and Draka, and it was going to be something that Nowak said to them when he was like fighting them. That's where I thought this was going as the episode went on. But no, it is talking about neither of you. It's talking about Nowak, but the other you is referring to all the men that he killed. And that is just, oh my God, this Antony's monologue is maybe one of the debate between Antony and Nowak is probably one of my favorites in recent anime history. If at all, that just destroyed Nowak's entire perspective in a flash. In an instant. But we start out the episode with it being set up because Ash is terrified. Ash is afraid. So we come over here to this setup of Ash being scared, right? And it's something that fear that is talking about is the essence of living. That has been a concept talked about in this series, that being scared is a sign that you are alive. That you are alive. You're scared of something. You have your humanity. That is a sign of that, right? And so for Ash to be scared, he also brings it to tying to the heretics, saying, well, if somebody's willing to die for their cause, that is something to be feared. I thought that was so ironic that he said that, where he's like, well, they're willing to die for this cause that doesn't exist. So, our enemy is willing to do anything for their cause, and that's why I'm scared. And Nowak kind of just looks at him, We're going to put Nowak right here. And kind of his whole thing. And then Antony, we're going to put over here because he's going to be integral to all of this here in a hot second. But Nowak's whole thing this entire time has been about the system and the idea that the system will protect him because it is the authority. And that's really what he's believed from the start. His whole thing was he was a mercenary. He was hired by the bishop. He's like, I'm part of the system now. The bishop believes that heretics need to be killed. I'm doing what he tells me to. And thus myself and my daughter, we are protected within the system because it has the authority. And because it is the church, he is under the assumption that the church is this absolute entity. It is this absolute entity that does not change, that it will remain constant And that's part of its divinity, right? From what we've seen of Nowak, that seems to have been his beliefs this entire time. So he could kill these heretics knowing that, well, the church says that they're bad. So I'm just doing what the church tells me to do. But over time, Nowak has kind of become obsessed with this idea. He has warped this idea that heliocentrism is this evil against the church. And really, the main reason behind it is because of the bubble that he lives in. He lives in this bubble and this silo where all he hears is how bad it is and how evil it is. So why would he think anything else? Why would he think that any neighboring countries or anyone else in the world is believing anything different? Because he's just trapped in this bubble of all these same thoughts and expressions. And we find ourselves in that a lot. Sometimes, especially if you live in like a small town or if you are on certain sects of the internet, you kind of find yourselves in these thought silos and you're just surrounded by like-minded people who think the same thing. And so you accept that as this must be the way the world works. And the problem is that oftentimes it's not. You're just in that silo. The rest of the world is thinking something a little bit different than you. And we experience that even now. Like I'm from the US. In the US, we don't get a lot of international news unless it's related to ourselves. So I feel unless I seek it out, I feel left out of the bubble of knowing what's going on with the rest of the world. And when you in your country go somewhere else internationally and you figure out nobody really cares about your country and what's going on, that can be a pretty jarring thing when you're like, oh, you guys aren't privy to all this news. And they're like, no, it's not about us. So no. We're going to get to that monologue. We're going to get to it. It's just crazy. But yeah, now when Schmidt talks about in just a few hours, morning will come as it always does. And I hope one day you two will learn to smile at the sunrise. The moment he said that, I'm like, Schmidt's dying. The moment he said that, I'm like, those are like, you might as well just put a little TM by famous last words, right? You might as well just do that. But Schmidt's whole thing is that he wants Draka to appreciate. He wants her to appreciate the sunrise. Now, the question is, next episode, is she going to get past the sunrise? Is she going to be able to see it? When she learns that Schmidt is dead, will she appreciate the sunrise on his behalf? Or will she associate it further with his loss, like her dad's loss? I don't know. And she's like, that again. She's like, I told you I hate the sunrise. And he's like, well, I'd appreciate it. She said, I'd appreciate it if you wouldn't repeat yourself. And she's like, it's annoying. And he says, I'm not merely repeating myself. This time, I mean it. And she's like, why do you mean it? And he's like, well, because. She's like, are you trying to irritate me? He's like, no, you can interpret my repetition. He's like, it's an expression of my gratitude. He's like, I want you to enjoy the sunlight because it's something I enjoy. I can't believe my ship sank so hard. I had such high hopes for them. And he's like, even if the sunrise means nothing to you, to me, it's the most wonderful moment a person can experience. I hate that he was denied that. I hate that he was denied the sunrise. He didn't get to see it one more time. He died before he could see it. That sucks. I hate that. He's like, I wanted to share that with you. The moment he said I wanted to share it with you, I find that a shippable moment. I'll say it's a shippable moment, sure. But it's probably because you and I happen to cross paths. I like that little shot of them in the moonlight. They almost look like little ghosts there. I love that. So then Nowak and his men show up, crossbows at the ready. The one group has the formation, and they ask them to surrender. And then the moment they come out, that's when Schmidt and Draka make their move. R.I.P. to those guys. They just clocked off the heads and ran. I really thought that Nowak was going to do something more in the moment, but he lets them go by. And that's when he's like, we need to go head out. And we'll just take the horses. So 3 of them leave. He asks if Ash wants to go. And Ash says, not me. And Nowak says, well, I suppose it's my job. Isn't that wild? I think if Ash went, he would have died. I think if Ash had gone, he would have died. And in that moment, Ash determined that this was not a cause he was worth dying for. Which, in hindsight, is another factor that goes into this. Right? Because Ash is like, well, we're going to get these heretics, they're trying to undermine the orthodoxy, but I mean, what they're doing isn't worth losing my life over. That feels like it's setting up for later on. And then Nowak decides that he's going to go chase after them. And Schmidt, he says, I've never been afraid to carry out a decision I made because I thought I was just obeying the destiny that God gave me. I like this conversation Schmidt has when he opens up and says that when you're just blindly obeying, there's not as much fear, but you're also just blindly obeying. Is that truly living, right? He's like, I thought I was just going through this destiny that God gave me, but now he's like, I'm actually afraid for the first time. And I like it ties back to Aksha. It ties back to Aksha, who is scared, but he's like, I'm scared, but I know I have to do this. And so Draka's like, why are we having this monologue right now? And he's like, I pray for your success. Well, your prayers did not go unanswered, Schmidt. So, and then he decides to die for his own belief. It's interesting that Schmidt finally, like, he went against what he had once said was a bad thing, but in the end, it's like, it allowed him... What's crazy is his belief in that moment allowed her to be successful. It cost him his life, but it was a belief that was his own, and it allowed her to move forward and be successful. I'm so glad that, honestly, I'm so glad that she was successful to getting to Antony, because if she had gotten there and those guards had not let her through, I was like, that would have been the ultimate tragedy. Also, I can't decide if Nowak on the horse is the shot that we get from the OP or not, but damn, Schmidt knocking that one guy out with the knife, I thought it killed him. I really thought it killed him, but it didn't. And then he tackled the one guy and knocked Nowak off the horse, which if you've ever fallen off a horse, that's terrifying. And then he fought the one guy, and he's like, before faith was my motive, but now my faith is wavering. And my justification for killing you is as well, but even so, I'm going to kill you for my own selfish reasons. Schmidt went out so good. He went out like such a badass. Damn it. I hate it. And I don't think, whenever Antony is telling Nowak about that the men he killed, that those will all be lost to history, and that we'll talk about the records and everything that were taken away. There's also the idea that these guys, all of these other men that Nowak served under, lots of them died against the heretics. So it's not just like Nowak was the only one killing heretics and heretics were the only ones targeting Nowak. That wasn't the case at all. But Antony is, he's so slimy. And he just twists it in such a way. But I think it's important to note that these other guys died too. Like Free, these guys, they all died thinking they were taking out these heretics. They believed kind of the same thing that Nowak did, only Nowak, you thought he was just playing the system, but he kind of, in playing the system, got entrenched in its beliefs and then couldn't get away from it. And, oh man. So yeah, poor Schmidt, he gets stabbed in the gut. And then Nowak slices him through the damn neck. I've been waiting for them to say Yolinta's name. Just say her name. Say her name. So I want Nowak to know that she published the damn book, that she was alive this whole time. I thought it was going to happen this whole episode, and it doesn't. And it's so frustrating. Ugh. Because I thought he's like, he stabbed Schmidt in the neck, and I'm like, well, son of a bitch. And then he falls down. But then Schmidt starts to speak, and I'm like, okay, Schmidt has this opportunity to say something. And that's when Nowak says, it's a miserable death that a believer in heliocentrism deserves. And then Schmidt says, even so, it's the fate that I chose. I wanted him to say Yolinta's name, but that's such a badass move. That's such a badass last line. He's like, it's a fate that I chose. He's like, this, my whole life, my adulthood, I'd been following the obeying of this god of nature that I thought was going to dictate my fate. But in the end, I chose how I went out. He basically just starts playing Frank Sinatra's I Did It My Way. And that's just all there is to it. I was like, such a badass line. But it kind of is such like an in the face to Nowak, saying like, you've been following someone else's creed this whole time. You've not been really believing what you yourself wants to believe, right? And so Nowak just had believed that the heretics we're following a feudal system. He's like, I don't understand why you guys follow this belief. And it's like Nowak at no point considered that the heretics were in the same boat that he was. Just as Nowak believed in this one system as being like something of value, so did the heretics. They believed the heliocentrism was something of value. The thing that's so interesting is that Nowak's beliefs are not of like the world itself or things like that. It's just of, okay, I believe in the system. And meanwhile, the heretics are like, F the system. We believe in this thing that's beyond that. But anyway, Schmidt says it's the fate that I chose. And then he dies. I love that he dies looking back at him with like the eyes, his like Schmidt the whole time looking back. Like he always is looking back at people and he dies with that. And then he died with two swords, like two cross-shaped symbols, one in his side and one in his back. Et tu, Brute. Et tu, Brute. And that's when Nowak falls over because he like sees the blood and faints. Luckily, Draka is not turned away by these guards. Thank God. She pays him off. Antony, having a wonderful dream, is interrupted. Is like, why are there not hookers here? And then Draka shows up. I hate Antony so much, but damn it! He's so ridiculously crazy in this episode. Also, can we give a shout out to the horse? Can we give a shout out to the horse? I like he tells this like little altar boy, he's like, get out of here. Let the adults talk. As soon as Draka brings up capitalism, he's like, this is not for you to hear, young man. Also, can we, let's hear it for the horse of the year. The horse coming to get Nowak. I love that. The one instant where we're not killing horses in this whole series. So Draka confronts Antony. And I think it's important to know that Antony has always been out for himself. If we recall back from so many episodes ago, Antony hates his father. He hates his dad. He does not see the point in spending money on the Inquisition. He does not see the point of killing heretics. He thinks it's a waste of time and resources. His dad's just doing it. The only reason Antony went along with it for so long was to get the grapple of the orthodoxy from his dad's hands and then take it for himself because he wanted the safety of the system. Da 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 da. He just wanted the safety of the system. And since he was a Nepo baby, he got access to it. Sound familiar? Not that any children born into wealth have taken positions of power from their relatives. That's never happened in the entire human race. At least not since this time. What? But yeah, that's exactly what happens. So he took the system, he took over the system, and then he just did what would benefit him. So we talk about like Ash, when we first met him, how Ash was like killing people, like the torture thing. He was like, why are we torturing? Let's just kill them all and just get it over with. And Antony went along with it because that's what was going along with the system. He didn't question it because why would you question the system that you're profiting off of? And so he's like, so what's your idea? I like that Antony, this whole scene, Antony is in a bedtime robe and his skivvies. He's just sitting on a pew in a robe and his like undershirt. And he's like, what you got, girl? Let's bring it. It feels like a mob boss out of The Sopranos. And Draka's like, I'm just going to get straight to the point. And he's like, good, we only got so much time in this episode. It's a book. And so Draka brings up this idea of personal property ownership. And what she says about books is it. She's like, as people start to get their own things and have personal property, books will sell very well. And Antony's like, go on. She says, right now, people desire pleasure more than religion. And that's why. So she talks about this idea of pleasure versus religion. Now, eventually, in modern times, those two things will be merged. where we will have the mass production of Bibles. And that's honestly where I thought we were going with this at first. I'm like, oh, they're going to mass produce the Bible. Her thing is just, in exchange for my idea of mass producing the Bible, let me produce this one book. That's why I thought she was going with it, but it goes in an even better direction. But now think about it. Now it's like you have Christian movies, you have religious movies, you have religious offshoots, you have different religious texts being printed in multiple languages. Like, the model has eventually been adopted. I mean, last year, the Catholic Church for Jubilee had an anime mascot. They literally had an anime mascot for their Jubilee because they were trying to convert in Japan anime like fans. Like that was a real thing. Go look it up. Go look up Lush. Lush is a great time. She's adorable. Love Lush. But like, that was a whole thing. They were combining this pleasure aspect with religion. Now, the series isn't at that point yet, so we don't really talk about it that much, but that's kind of where we've gone to. And this is sort of like the model for it. And then the talk about street performances and then executions. I mean, that's kind of the sad thing about the human species, is that we like being entertained. Since the days of the gladiators, are you not entertained? Why do you think so many people watch true crime documentaries? It's that idea of pleasure. It's that idea of what we find intriguing. It's integral to our species. And she's like, you've seen the way they gather like vultures. I think Antony also kind of respects Draka in a way, because he's like, she gets it. She knows what's going on. Everyone is starving for stimulation. And he's like, well, maybe. So she talks about there needs to be this stimulation, which is even true now. People can get overstimulated, but we all need some kind of stimulation, right? So she talks about it would be an easy way for people to read and they would grow addicted. And I mean, the book itself, the technological upgrade from the book has been phones. It's literally been that. It's literally been the phone. That's the technological upgrade. So, I mean, there's that to consider. But yeah, it's crazy. It's just the technology that has advanced over time is so wild to think about. And here we're just like at the beginning of it with just the mass production of text. It's so wild. But yeah, like Draka says, the profits will be immense. Think of how much we've profited over books over the years. Think of how much technology has profited. Think of now using our phones for games, for downloads, for streaming. Entertainment is profitable. It really is. So her thing is think of the profits. And that's when I thought she was going to start talking about like mass producing Bibles, but that's not where we went. That's where I want your cooperation. I want access to a printing press, and I won't let them go to waste. And so then Antony's like, okay, you've got my attention. What's this book about? It's just like, it's this fan fiction that Akshan, Bodini, and Yolenta and a couple others have been working on, for a couple of like 30 years. She's like, that's the complicated part. I like how Draka tries to get around that it's heliocentrism without saying that it's heliocentrism. She starts out being like, well, it's sort of a cosmological model, a certain hypothesis about nature, you could say. To put it simply, it's about the movements of the earth. And Antony's like, you're talking about heliocentrism. He's like, wait, what? We're going back to heliocentrism? I love how shooketh Antony is in this moment where he's like, what? He's like, do you think it's blasphemy? Even so, I have more to say. I like Draka has built up this courage to have this conversation. Think about it. Have you ever heard of the historical precedent for heliocentrism being suppressed? So she asks, has there been a precedent for suppressing heliocentrism? Like, y'all been studying astronomy for years. You've been skirting around this for ages. Why'd we just now start killing people over it in the last 50 years? Why has this been a thing? Is heliocentrism really blasphemy? And he's like, well, what do you mean? Of course it is. And he says, spare me the jokes. I like that at first Antony is like, well, this was a waste of time. Of course it is. Of course it's blasphemy. I mean, why wouldn't it be? We've been killing people for ages for it. Before I send you to the dungeon, let me tell you something. My father sentenced many people to death for heliocentrism in the past. to continue its suppression, and that's when it hits him. He's like, when you put it that way, I've never heard it being suppressed elsewhere. And she's like, then that's it. She's like, you mean to tell me that all of this has been because of your dad's stupid ideas and the fact that he had power to do something? Again, when has that happened in human history? But I love the point that she brings up. She's like, why are we suppressing it anymore? Why are we continuing this? Are you your dad? And she's like, the words create an impression and everyone avoids it out of fear. When I learned of it, it sounded dangerous too. But after all, cosmology runs counter to divine creation. Avoiding it seems obvious. I will say this. Anthony is such a bitch and I don't like him, but they animated him in Silver Fox mode in this episode and it was really, really good. I really, really liked it. You could be punished for that. One has to be careful. But then she says, as long as you're careful, then is there any reason it should be absolutely forbidden? So basically what Draka is proposing is she's like, why can't heliocentrism, why can't it run parallel in existence to the church and to religion? Why can't they run simultaneously side by side? And in all honesty, it's been a question that's been like plaguing the series from the start because it's like you have Bodini, for example, you have someone like Bodini who was trying to actively do what Draka is pointing out. Draka's like, well, why can't they exist in the same sphere? Why can't people be religious but also study heliocentrism? And that's exactly what Bodini was trying to do, what he wanted to go to another country where he wouldn't be persecuted to accomplish, and he didn't get the chance to make it there. She's like, couldn't it be the subject stimulates enjoyment? She's like, yes, heliocentrism is offering a different way to look at the world, but she's like, why not mass produce it? Why not make it entertainment? Like, sure, it's science, and sure, it's a philosophical way of looking at the world. She's like, but it doesn't have to be in contrast to religion. It doesn't have to be its enemy if you don't want it to be, And he's like, in other words, you believe that whether heliocentrism is blasphemy or not is at the discretion of whoever's in power. No shit, Sherlock. Yeah, that's kind of the whole point. He's like, the system gets to choose whether or not it's blasphemy or not. And she's like, yeah. And Antony's like, okay. Antony's like, sure. But you have to understand this. If there's any shift, he's like, I'm going to cut you off no matter what. No hesitation, no second thoughts. You will be dead. He's like, if something goes awry and this doesn't work out, I will throw you under the bus. You do realize that, right? Like Antony, at least Antony's up front and lets her know this. And she's like, okay. She's like, I would do the same, man. I like that Draka kind of has the same views as Antony at this point, but I find Draka infinitely more moral than Antony, which is, and she hasn't, faked the death of someone before to ruin someone's life. And then they talk about the profit ratio, and as soon as she was doing that, I was like, he's going to say 80-20, 50-50, no way. And she's like, son of a bitch, fine, whatever. And then he's like, okay, cool, that settles everything. And she's like, I have to mail this letter. I want to know what the letter says. We better find out. She better be able to mail that letter. I want to see what's in it. Can we find out what's in the letter? Show, are you going to let us do this next episode? Please? I don't know. I don't know next episode if we're going to pick up where we left off with Nowak and the others, or if we're just going to do a time skip for the next 3 episodes. I have no idea. I have no idea if we're going to see the outcome of all of this. But it's so wild that Nowak puts the pieces together and is like, and then we have the little intermission card and it's Schmidt's knife, or is it Nowak's knife? One of the knives that are there on the little belt loop and everything. And just as he's like, Antony's like, oh, I have my carrier pigeons. Here you go, girl. Use this one I got to mail your letter. Right as they're about to go, Nowak walks in. And then he remembers Father Antony, which, man, the last 25 years were not kind to Antony. Although he pulls off the silver fox look, he has aged considerably. But yeah, so Nowak remembers him. I'm surprised that Nowak and Antony were not working together this whole time. I thought that Nowak was still connected with Antony, but clearly he's not. I don't know. That's crazy to me. So yeah. And he's like, it's me, Nowak. I once served as an inquisitor. That, to me, the moment he said that, I was like, oh, this is not going to go well in Nowak's favor at all. Because if Nowak and Antony were still connected, then there's a chance that Nowak would be able to have some kind of pull against Antony. But that, my friends, I have an eraser now on these. That is not the case. Antony does not remember Nowak, or he remembers him, but he doesn't care about Nowak at all. Didn't care, which is so, that part's crazy to me too, because you have Antony, who back in the day, whenever he faked Yolinta's death, he was doing it to undermine Nowak and throw him under the bus and discredit him from getting more power, which is what happened inadvertently. But now Antony's like, oh, all those scheming I did back then, I don't even remember it. Oh my God. He's like, step away from that woman. He's like, you're in danger. She believes in the accursed heliocentric theory. That one word, and. That one word, and question mark, is the most damning word in this entire series. Because in that split second, Antony has undone everything that has happened. And what's so infuriating is that all these men have died. And Antony is like, so? That entire moment, and is like, it doesn't matter. That's the insane part, is that Antony, that whole line of just, and? At that moment, heliocentrism was no longer a factor. And the crazy part is that we've been following this story and seeing all of these soldiers die, all these people we've cared about die. But the thing is, we're seeing it from the perspective of these individuals who, some of them don't have family, some of them don't have people to remember them by. The concept of memory, Yolinta has talked about it, others have talked about it, the concept of memory and of your name, of your namesake, is so important. And that's kind of one of the reasons why Bodini, I think, wanted his name on the theory and everything, is because he wanted to be remembered. He wanted his name to pass through time, because as Antony points out, eventually, if your name's not in print, or if your name isn't spread through oral tradition over and over again, people will forget, they won't remember. And that will be lost to history. And that is utterly terrifying and so cruel. But yeah, the moment he says, and Nowak's entire, like, what do you mean, and? Like, everything I've done, he says heliocentrism. He's like, the same theory your father was wary of. And I'm like, Antony hates his dad. He's like, you must remember. And the look on Antony's face when he tells him to step away from Draka, because Antony hated his dad. So he's like, yeah, my dad was worried about it, but I'm not him. He's like, why have you gone quiet? And that's when Nowak realizes that they're working together. And so then Antony says, well, what's the problem with heliocentrism? Tell me, what's the big problem with it? He becomes a character out of It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia. Let me just say, Suda as Nowak is incredible. Suda as him as a voice actor is so damn good. Like, he was so perfectly cast in this. Like, Suda handles the emotions so well. Because Antony's like, well, he's like, cosmology touches upon divine creation. Is that it? He says, but the previous bishop says, and he's like, no. He's like, Nowak, yeah, the previous bishop said that. If you're going to label and torture and kill people as heretics, then you should learn for yourself whether these steps are justified. And what a bitch. What a bitch to let him do it, to let him do all of these things and never ask him that. Because Antony hadn't thought of it himself, because he hadn't needed to, because it wasn't profitable. So he's just like, why? He was like, what was the point? And it should have been foreshadowing back with the one guy that says that Antony is being hypocritical because of this verse in the Bible. And then Antony's like, well, anybody can just change any verse to mean whatever they want it to mean. That should have been foreshadowing that he was going to do the exact same thing to Nowak here and be like, oh, well, Nowak's like, well, the Holy Scripture says, and he's like, oh, well, Antony is like a masterclass of just circling around that, being like, oh yeah, these two like lines in, they don't really talk about heliocentrism. He's like, if you stop and think clearly, they're not enough to prove that heliocentrism is blasphemy. I got so mad at that point because, you know, we've talked about this in other episodes, but it's kind of like whenever Christians will say that like that homosexuality is a sin and that's blasphemy and all of this, and they cite like the one line in Leviticus, and it's just like that one line is enough to prove it's blasphemy for everything, really? And this is exactly like that. He's like, oh, this one line about the earth not being moved, oh, you can interpret it a different way if you wanted to. You don't have to interpret it that way. I mean, I guess my dad interpreted it as heliocentrism, but it really doesn't have to be, honestly, if you think about it. Yeah. Anyone can interpret nearly any religious text however they want to. It's wild. He's like, that's because even heliocentrism is just one hypothesis among many. Maybe it was too uncertain to call it the one and only truth, but in the end, it's just a mathematical postulate. What's wrong with that? In fact, even if it was proven that the earth is moving, reading the Holy Scripture with that in mind is providing the proper interpretation. That's our work as theologians. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, you mean to tell me that this whole business with Potaki and Raffle, it didn't have to be that way? I would have been livid. If I was Nowak, I would have been livid. Because the thing is, it's not that Nowak wasn't smart enough to figure that out, but the thing is, he has conditioned himself over time to be entrenched in the system. When he was younger, he probably could have argued better with Antony. If it had been a younger Nowak, he probably could have argued it more. But this is a Nowak that has been spent 60 years or 40 years at least entrenched in the system. And so he was just like, but the system in power says that it's bad. And Antony's like, well, I mean, I'm the one in power, so I guess I get to determine whether it's bad or not. And he's like, and I'm kind of deciding that it's not really that bad. Rather than reject new opinions, we must explore them to better understand Holy Scripture. That line there where Antony's like, you know, maybe we should explore new ideas. Maybe we should explore new ideas and find ways to relate them to Christianity, because that seems like a good thing to do. That is the antithesis of everything they've been debating this whole series. They've been against that from the start. And Nowak is just so floored that it took it didn't take hardly anything to sway him. He's like, isn't that what our faith needs most now? I mean, from Antony's looking at it, he's like, Antony saw the writing on the wall, where everyone was telling him that the church was too rigid and it needed to change, but Antony just couldn't think of any inspiring way to change it. And then when he originally met Draka, she had some ideas, and he's like, oh, you might be somebody to like pick for information. You're one of the common folk. What do the common folk think we should do? Let's brain trust with them. And now that she's given him his answers, he's like, oh, you know what? The times are changing. The church needs to evolve. I mean, I personally have my own religious beliefs, and that's fine, but I am not blind to the notion that the church has evolved over time. It's so interesting. I went to, one of my friends is Catholic, and for Christmas, they invited me to a Catholic mass. And I was like, okay, I'll go to a Christmas mass. Why not? I like, one thing I do like about Catholicism is there's a very rigid, like, routine, and there is a spirituality to it. But I'm not going to lie, when I was in there, some of the traditions, and I didn't get to partake in some of the traditions because I'm not Catholic myself, I was just sitting there going, this is all made up by somebody. This is just somebody made this up, and y'all do it. Like, I can still feel the spirituality, and I still have my own personal beliefs, but there were so many conventions I was like, but this is all made up by somebody, and y'all are just doing this. And there were some aspects I've seen in other religions, and I'm like, y'all are doing the same thing they're doing. I'm just saying, you know. And the flex of Nowak on the torch, the flex of his hand, I was afraid Nowak was going to drop that damn torch and all the pews were going to go up. I thought he was going to drop the torch and light the whole place on fire. He may do that next episode. The OP shows Raffle in the flames, so maybe he'll light the whole place on fire. Who knows? We don't know what's going to happen next, but, you know, it could be even seen as a natural scientific proof of the Holy Trinity. Like, Antony's just talking out of his ass now. He's like, from a theological perspective, it could be a wonderful discovery that reveals God's glory. Meanwhile, Badini's rolling in his grave going, the fudge am I to you? I was like, oh my God. And then he's like, are you kidding? And he's like, yeah, my father was strict about cosmology, but I'm sure as you are aware, he once studied astronomy too. He's like, while doing so, I like that Antony's just vocalizing what he probably knew 25 years ago. He's like, my dad probably like experienced something that changed his reverence from the heavens into an inferiority complex. And from there, he just decided that he wanted to get rid of the heretics. And he's like, somewhere in the world, there was an authority who had a strict view on cosmology. Scholars researching heliocentrism had the misfortune of serving under him. And then like Padaki. And so then he says, he didn't want to involve the church. People began to believe the myth that heliocentrism was a forbidden topic. And then the dirty work of that operation couldn't be entrusted to anyone from the clergy. It had to be outsourced. So Antony in that moment not only unravels Nowak's entire belief system, but he also says, oh, by the way, you were just like a second-rate hired hand because my dad didn't want to like entrust anybody with the church because we didn't want any records of that. So we hired some underground work that was a former mercenary to do it for us that could be easily erased from the system if we needed to. Oh my God. If that's what happened, this entire scandal was not a crusade to protect the church or the faithful. It was merely a misunderstanding by a small group of people. Antony has been planning this Shakespearean revenge since the 80s. He has been planning this revenge on Nowak, and it is finally complete. Because Antony is like, everything, Nowak was so high and mighty, being like, your father's hired me, I'm the head of the Inquisition, we're doing it my way, la la la. And Antony's like, I hate this guy, I want to just destroy him. And he did. He sure damn did. Right there. Saying everything you've done was meaningless and insignificant to the grand scheme of the church. And if I were Nowak, I would have been pissed. He's like, a misunderstanding. He's like, just a misunderstanding. The fact that he named every man. I like that you can see the little thing where he has the scar on his head and he's like, put some stitches in it real quick. Like, good quick work there, Nowak. But the fact that he's like, Hubert, Raffle, Aksha, Badini. I mean, I'm sure he killed other heretics, but these are the ones that are central to the plot. But the fact that he remembered Hubert, we're not surprised he remembered Raffle. The fact that he remembered Aksha and Badini, he's like, I murdered them with my own hands. They were executed for researching heliocentrism. They were killed by me. That says so much that Nowak remembered them and that he took their deaths close to heart. I mean, even as a mercenary, he took their deaths close to heart and were like, I did this because of my faith and because of the system. And now you're making it seem like those names don't matter. And the terrifying thing is when Antony says that none of them will be remembered. The one amazing thing is I was so pissed he didn't say Yolenta's name, because if he had said Yolenta's name, then Draka would have been like, oh, she was alive. She's the one that wrote this book. And then Nowak would have been able to piece together that Antony lied to him, and it would have unraveled everything. And I was waiting for that moment and we didn't get it, and I'm pissed about it. But one thing that's clever about this show is that by not saying her name, she's not included in the ones that Antony mentions. Antony mentions that Raffle and Hubert and Badini and Aksha, as well as Nowak, they will all be forgotten. But Yolenta's name wasn't said because her name's going to be on the book. Now the question is Nowak going to see the book? Is he going to see his daughter's name and realize this? I don't know. And he said, my daughter. And he's like, but the records, there are records. And that's when Badini's like, when Antony is like, oh, well, we didn't make any of those records public. He's like, we did that all under the table. He's like, that was more than 25 years ago. He's like, far too many of your cosmology executions were filed away as confidential. But I'm a cautious man. Just now, I ordered my men to look up your remaining records and destroy any that were found. So there was enough time that passed for Antony to go get the carrier pigeon and then to tell his men, be like, oh yeah, all of those executions, those things we did, like, that were pretty scandalous, let's just delete those files. Let's pretend like those didn't exist. So if anybody questions, we'll be like, what heliocentrism executions? Which ones? They don't exist. That is so crazy and just believable because it happens now. Oh my God. Yeah. And Draka's like, should I be here? She's like, am I part of this conversation? By tomorrow morning, they'll all be gone. Again, when Nowak gripped the side of that damn pew, I'm like, he's going to torch this whole place. He's like, was I really the only one? Was I the only one in all the world? The one who suppressed heliocentrism was actually me. I mean, here's the thing. The answer is actually no, because the bishop was ordering it too, and you did train all of those men to also suppress it as well, the inquisitors. So no, technically it was not just you. Spiritually, fundamentally, it might have been him and the bishop. That's the crazy thing. But also, he's like, to the best of my knowledge, he's like, after all this time, if we had been born elsewhere at another time, there were other possibilities. But that's not the case. This is what we call fate. I love that the climax of this series, potentially, I don't know what the next 3 episodes have in store, but one of the climax of this arc is this debate between Antony and Nowak, and Antony basically saying, yeah, you created this monster. It really wasn't anybody else. It was just you. Even if that's not entirely true, the thing is, he's like, nobody's ever going to remember otherwise. He's like, your names, when it comes to you and the heretics that you executed, neither of you will be known to history. And then there's all the stars there. Oh, that's so sad. Now, to be fair, Antony does not know the entire contents of the book that Draka is wanting to publish. So that might come back and he might eat his words a little bit on that. But oh my God. What an insane episode. This is so freaking good. I am in awe. I did not think I would be feeling bad for Nowak, and I am. I mean, I was earlier in the series, but I'm really feeling bad for him now to have his entire worldview shattered and everything he did to be revealed to be superfluous because Antony's a bitch and is changing the game to benefit himself. And I shouldn't be surprised about Antony, but damn. I am sad that Schmidt's dead. I'm really sad that Schmidt's dead. Honestly. That part guts me a little bit. At least Draka made it. At least Yolenta's mission is not forfeit yet. So we got to find out what this letter is, who it's being sent to. Is Nowak going to figure out about Yolenta, his daughter? Is that going to come to him before he dies? What's going to happen? Are we going to do time skip next episode? What's in store for us these last 3 weeks? I don't know, but holy cow. I'm really looking forward to hearing y'all's thoughts about this. So I'm looking forward to hearing your thoughts. So I'm excited for the next episode, but I want to savor these last 3. I want to savor them really hard. So anyway, I hope y'all have a wonderful week. Please stay safe, take care, and yeah, I'll be back very soon with episode 23 of Orb on the movements of the earth. And I'll see you then.